And the Republicans want to cut $100 billion this year, and the Tea Party wants to cut $2.5 trillion, 6 times as much as the president over the next decade.
Economists have said over the past few months, often and loudly, that what we're really going to have to do is touch on entitlements, make deep cuts in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and cuts at the Pentagon that are going to be necessary. These are enormous challenges, things that people are not going to so readily accept, and yet the people need to be reminded why it has to happen eventually. That stand up and take it, because it has to happen. That was not a part really of what happened tonight.
No, the president mentioned it. He talked about the debt commission. He talked about let's have a serious discussion about Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, but his own debt commission has some very specific ideas about how to deal with that, and the president didn't endorse any of that. I can tell you when several of we journalists met with Speaker Boehner today, he also didn't discuss it in any detail. I mean, look, these are very politically explosive issues, and I don't think anyone wants to be the first one to jump off that cliff. It's almost like a Thelma and Louise moment. They want everybody to get in this and agree. So I think that's going to happen later rather than sooner.
Of course, if the goal was to uplift the American people, to remind us of all the things that we have accomplished, of all that is possible under the American way of life, he certainly spent the beginning portion of this speech, and I'd say probably the first 30 to 35 minutes, bringing us toward that point. And I thought very interesting tonight that so often the beginnings of these speeches, the opposition party will knock the president, from whichever side he comes, off his game by these long and extended periods of applause and catcalls and all the rest in the place. We went, by my count at least, 14, 15, actually 17 minutes before the first standing ovation in the crowd. Say what you want about stagecrafting of these things, but it's very important, and those who run these events admit that it's very important. And tonight, I'm not sure that the president was prepared for that. There were a number of lines that he stopped for when he seemed to be expecting an enormous amount of applause, and it didn't come. A new experience for those who write the speeches and for the man who delivered them.
Absolutely. As I say, I think that they're confused. A lot of the members were, because of the fact, as we've pointed out, Republicans were sitting next to Democrats. It was all mixed up. It wasn't by party lines. And so as a result, they were a little bit reluctant to stand up and cheer because, there were Republicans spread across the whole chamber and Democrats the same.
Chris Wallace from Fox News Sunday. Great to see you tonight. Thank you.
And as a quick plug, we'll have an exclusive interview with Speaker John Boehner on Fox News Sunday.
Fox News Sunday, this Sunday, and every Sunday right here on this Fox station. Our White House correspondent Wendell Goler is across the rotunda, and Wendell had gotten a lot of the background on what this night was to be, the expectations inside the White House, behind the veil, if you will. Wendell, did that part of this live up tonight?
I think so, Shepard. It was a more muted address, a call, an attempt to be uplifting without giving specific targets for Republicans to attack, if also making relatively few commitments to the deficit reduction that they wanted. There was probably a more muted response on the part of lawmakers, as Chris Wallace noted, because Republicans and Democrats sat together and didn't feed off one another. That is one reason why a speech that contained just as many words as last year's State of the Union address actually took 10 minutes less to deliver. There's a big defense of innovation. The president saying that it's not just to change our lives, it's how we in this country make our living. Investments in education, innovation, and infrastructure, he said, will make America a better place to do business. The White House aides also defended the president's reluctance to embrace the calls of his deficit commission, saying that they're not really quite that far from the deficit commission's recommendation, but it's really going to take a bipartisan effort, Republicans and Democrats working together to make the tough decisions that Chris points out need to be made in Social Security and Medicare and other entitlement programs. Shepard?
It does, Wendell, to be the one thing that nobody is mentioning, at least not in loud voices, and it's the one point on which, frankly, tonight I don't think either side is going to hammer home hard. Chris Wallace is back with us, and Chris, there was a suggestion that the Republicans are going to talk a lot about spending cuts, over and over about spending cuts, but not necessarily in the places where we spend the most of the money. It has been hammered home over the last few days that just about 10% of the budget is what's left over after everything that's spoken for across Social Security, Medicare, Pentagon spending. And no one seems to be going there, at least not strongly, not with any force.
Not yet, but they certainly are going to have to get to it because that is where the money is, as Willie Sutton would say. So they are going to have to, and you're exactly right. Non-security discretionary spending is, I think, 12% of the budget. So, you're talking about education, you're talking about health, you're talking about law enforcement, an awful lot of issues on which, you're really going to be cutting to the bone with the kinds of cuts people are talking about. And obviously, a minor cut in Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security can mean hundreds of billions or even trillions of dollars.
Just a few minutes, we'll have the Republican response, of course, from Congressman Ryan, as you mentioned just a short time ago. Give us an idea of how Republicans will say, in many cases, the same thing. We have to cut, we have to innovate, we have to educate, but we have to spend less. How the Republicans will put a fine point on the differences between the two tonight.
I think what they're going to talk about is the limits of government. The fact that if spending more money were the answer, then spending the trillions of dollars over the last 2 years on the stimulus would have solved the problem, and we would have a rip-roaring economy. We don't, and I think their argument is going to be, you're going to hear from Paul Ryan, who is really the intellectual leader of the whole idea of spending cuts in the House and really among the whole Republicans on Capitol Hill. You're going to hear from him the idea of limited government, step back, less regulation, less taxation, especially less spending, keep the money in the private sector, and let the free enterprise system do what it does best, which is generate jobs.
1 year ago, you and I were together in a position similar to this, as we were waiting to hear Bobby Jindal, the governor of the state of Louisiana, a rising star.
Actually, 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Governor McDonald.
Oh, well, they do fly by.
They do fly by.
Governor McDonald is not enormously different, but I think that our viewers are probably going to remember Governor Jindal at the time. He was coming off what was widely seen as a successful run during very difficult times for the state of Louisiana. He came to a position widely was said didn't look comfortable, didn't have a great night. They're now in the process, and he in the process rehabilitating himself and making himself a national figure again. Bottom line, these things rarely work out for the opposition speaker, be he Republican or Democrat, or she for that matter, after the president has spoken.
Well, look, the president, first of all, he's a very accomplished speaker. He's been in these situations multiple times. Usually the person who's giving the Republican response has not had that kind of stage experience. And in addition, you have the president in front of the entire government. You have, in this case, it'll be Paul Ryan by himself in the House Budget Committee room. So it's going to be a chambers. It's going to be a little bit different. But having said that, for those who don't know him, Paul Ryan is one of the really rising stars in the Republican Party. He is scary smart when it comes to the budget and deficits, and he's somebody it'll be very interesting to see what he says. Interesting to see how he performs, but he's going to be one of the driving forces behind the Republicans in their drive on cutting the spending this year.
And Congressman Ryan, by our producers in the control room's count, will begin speaking in just about 15 seconds. Interestingly, the Tea Party representative, Michelle Bachmann of Minnesota, will speak after that. First, let's hear from Congressman Ryan. Now, the Republican response to the State of the Union address.